When my mother is really angry, she's silent. The woman has opinions about everyone and everything, but let someone have an opinion on her and she will bite their head off or quietly simmer. Her friends had now become what my mother had always been, braggadocious. They were living the Latina mom fantasy of seeing their children enter fruitful marriages, bigger homes than they had had in their childhood, and heading to their third child by 27. Meanwhile, her daughter started a TikTok account at In Daddy Recovery. For every child they bore, I adopted a dog. For every corporate promotion they earned, I applied for a freelance gig. For every anniversary they had in their marriage, I quietly took a celibacy vow because dating is fucking rough. To her friends, motherhood was experimentation of parental styles, hypothesis. If I do A and wait, then B is the guaranteed result, and they were all getting their B's. Yet my mother never had the humility to wait. As a child, she was very outspoken about her parental theories on how to raise a good, humble human being, of which humiliation was a ritual. Going shopping or out to eat with my mother and her friends was like going to a class from a professor invited to teach the semester. At least once during the outing, she would use my comfort and dignity as a podium to preach how to make a good kid. When my aunt and niece had traveled from Puerto Rico to visit her in New York, my mother was in pure entertainer hostess mode, determined to show them a magnificent time. It was a mode she placed herself in even when visiting them, which is what they loved. My mother's vacation really became theirs, inviting them to restaurants and excursions, driving them around and leaving them thank you notes and gifts and money. She saw herself as grateful and inclusive while they loved the 2 week servant. Of course, my mother would not see it this way, but I would, because every servant of someone else dreams of a servant of their own. And that was me. There I was, 3 buses across New York City traffic, absolutely lost and heated in both emotions and bodies. Embody. I was racing from work to join my mother in the 20th dinner she had organized, and she was paying for them with monopoly money and unconditional love. It was in Pio Pio at 10th Ave. After running what felt like the New York Marathon, I arrived, doused in my sweat. I immediately went for the table water and scarfed French fries because I was so dehydrated. My mother had ordered massive plates for everyone to eat from, but for some reason my consumption of the final fries on that plate disgusted her. As I scarfed them down, confused by my dehydration's craving for both water and salty things, I saw my mother's contorting face and her audible whisper, "Stop it! You're a hog!" and to leave some for them. Suddenly, I was in a game of French fry rebellion, called Marie Antoinette. I had my mother cornered. She wanted to be so subtle with her apparent rage of me scarfing the final fries that she refused not to whip out a "You being greedy." Meanwhile, my aunt and niece were looking at her because clearly they were full. Their plates were looking more like an anthropological site of the last remaining chicken bones on earth. It was as if they had really experienced the Last Supper. My mother apologized for me, bought a whole new plate of french fries that nobody touched. Her perceived shame in front of them had made her shame me in front of them, and in the end, she paid more for it. Those very family members eventually would stop talking to my mom, inventing their 15th millionth character assassination of her. Something they had done all her life, which is why I could not understand why she turned me into the beast who devoured fries in front of them. If you ask my mother what fuels my bouts of depression, she will literally say it is because she gave me such a great childhood. I was unprepared for adulthood. She actually does say that. I had lived such a fantastic life, so spoiled. I cannot handle the world of no that waited for beyond her apartment complex. When she announced this theory, there was not one local bridge within my vicinity to jump off of. And the level of delusion stunned me. This was the same woman that publicly laughed and discussed at a gathering of friends with their kids how she hid all the plates, knives, and forks around me because I did not wash them properly, or at least she felt I did. My face grimaced with noted shame, and she looked at me as if I should handle the truth. It was only as her friends looked at her in confusion that she stopped. Thus, it was not my pain that quieted her, it was their judgment. Kindly, my mother refuses to blame me or herself for why I'm not married, rich, and on my fourth child, especially when she swore her raising of me was of unequivocal excellence and not one of the key reasons I should have voiced anxiety and inside out too. In her head, she raised a humble girl, not a submissive one, a generous child, not a self sabotaging one, a kind woman, not a people pleaser with no boundaries. And as I look back on my childhood, I see my mother raised me to be her. And she was the kind of woman that would buy french fries for people that did not like her, out of shame for what they thought, and not because I was hungry. How that girl could grow up to have children and marriage quickly, well, makes me dehydrated in wonder. All right, let's discuss. So, my mother's does not talk to her family, or really, they don't talk to her. And I feel bad for her because my mother was always the black sheep of her family. And they were hyper aware. And it's something that I've seen a lot of BIPOC families discuss, especially ones that are still very close to their parents' native nation. I mean, obviously, Puerto Rico is a part of America, but we are treated like immigrants. And my mother was always giving really lavish gifts, and it's so funny because she interpreted her visits to Puerto Rico as like being intrusive and kind of clusterfucking with their lives. And to be honest, they milked that cow for all. She would take them out to dinners, to restaurants they'd never even heard of, really fancy, pay for it, buy them all gifts. I mean, my uncle gave me $20 for one birthday, and she bought them like his her son like this two his son a $200 game set. And I felt like my mother was it's very hard to realize you were born into a family that never liked you. And for all that they laughed with you, they did not want you to succeed, especially over them. And my mother's eagerness to be loved by them, to be liked by them, to be approved by them came in exchange of me. Because I think something my grandmother does to my mom, and by the way, my grandmother's a fabulous grandmother, but not the best mom. And I'm sure my mom will be the same. Um, and it's this kind of I hurt the only person that will stay with me. I I bully the only person that doesn't bully me. Like my mom will die for my grandma, and my grandma kills her, and it's the same dynamic with me. And my family came to New York, which was a very rare event, particularly my aunt, because she's a nervous flyer. You might have heard her in the lovely story episode Carmen. And and I I don't I mean New York City traffic is heinous, but that day I was just not catching a break. There wasn't a train I didn't miss, a bus that wasn't delayed. I was running around, and I finally got to the restaurant, and I was Bio Bio on 10th Ave is fantastic, great food, always packed. And I just ran into that table and ate those french fries and doused myself in cold water. I was so dehydrated because it was like 98,000 degrees in New York. And my mother looked at me with so much shame. Mind you, they had already been there in an hour. I said, eat without me. And she was sending me like rage texts. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? You should be here with the family. And I finally arrived, and there was really only french fries left. My mother orders massive plates, massive plates of rice, two plates of rice, yellow, white, a plate of tostones, a plate of fries, and a huge plate of chicken, which is definitely what you should eat in Pio Pio, along with a plate of habichuelas. That you're welcome. And their sangria de parcha. Anyway, I arrive, and their plates are basically anthropological sites. Like it's just bones and remnants of the Last Supper. And I just went for the fries that were there, ate them, and my mother, God, she contorted her face. She was so angry that I was scarfing down those fries. And my mother has this weird thing of like no self awareness. She doesn't realize people are looking at her, looking at me, because usually, she does these really ugly faces and kind of whispers, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." And she thinks they don't hear her, except we're in a 4-inch table with and four people. Like there's no whispering, we hear. And it was a dynamic that just happened across my life. And I really thought that as I got older, it would be less. But I think there's two things happening because I'm single without kids. and deemed, according to a Latino family, deeply unsuccessful, not unsexual, but unsuccessful. Um, there's this kind of, you don't grow up until you make enough money. And it's one of the things that I talk about in an upcoming episode called Money Energy. Basically, my relationship with money has always been a little tainted because it was how my father abused me and it was how my mother abused herself. My mother just lived according to money that she didn't have or what she thought she didn't have, and my father just lived to steal it. And that energy made me resent money in many ways and not make it the epicenter of my world, because in some ways it was the reason I didn't have parents. My mother was felt I was an economic burden. My father treated me like an economic burden. He was going to make sure he didn't take on. And money, I was just so hyper aware that money's the reason why I was not safe and protected and loved more. And that is very unfortunate, let me tell you. And I'm sorry if that happened to you too. Um, and what I felt after that, I was just so overwhelmed by my mother's overwhelmingness, my mother said. And I didn't always struggle with depression. I think that's a narrative my mother told me. I remember being a very naturally happy child. My nature is happiness, and that's what Daddy Recovery is about, recovering my nature, because my nurture was so dark, in particular by my father's malice and my mother's weakness in the face of it. And part of her weakness was that, just wanting to be liked by dislikable people, wanting to protect and invest in the redemption arcs of others, because she really had given up on her own dreams or dreaming itself. And they all at the table, I remember my cousin and my aunt looking at her like, what the, like, what the frick? Like, it's okay. She could eat the fries. And that's something that happened a lot in my childhood, where my mother, she she was telling her friends, and it's something that I note in perspective, none of her friends ever talked ill about their kids, teased their children, made fun of them, or went on tangents about how they were so spoiled. They either bragged about their kids or kind of um, just existed with them, like coexisted. Like, it wasn't that heavy or dramatic. Naturally you brag, but it was also like, that's my kid, like, I'm gonna go get him a soccer ball. It was, but my mother, just, I was a PowerPoint session, and she was telling them how she, one day, I went to go get water, and all the cups, the plates, the forks, the knives, the spoons, everything was gone. Everything was gone from the kitchen. And I asked her, hey, where are the cups? And she had locked them away, and she smiled and she said, you don't know how to do dishes, so you're not going to have anything to eat off of. And it was her proud moment of teaching. And it's something that she does often when I visit, so I'm not visiting, of just kind of still trying to teach me. And I don't know if I ever published the episode, Mr. Clean, but I will. My mother is definitely OCD when it comes to cleanliness. She lives every day, she cleans her house and scrubs it, which you're supposed to do, yes. But like, I'm talking like, scrubs this 3 bedroom apartment, this 4 room apartment, 5 room, scrubs the floors on her knees and her hands, and scrubs the walls, and scrubs the counters, and like does really deep dive cleaning all day every day, and then crashes at like 2 o'clock in the morning, wakes up at 11 to clean again. And I don't think that's happiness, not because she's wasting her life cleaning, but like, I don't think that she's doing that out of happiness, because she doesn't dream. She doesn't have any goals, anything to look forward to. She just hopes I get pregnant soon. And And it's something that I think about a lot. And she told that to her friends, and they looked at her like, "What are you doing?" And I was so sad. And I looked at her with, as she was saying the story, with like really sad eyes, because sadness was the only thing that my mother would receive from me. Like if I were sad enough, she would stop. And the same thing with my dad. He loved me to have emotional breakdowns, and if I cried enough, he would stop verbally assaulting me in public. And when she said, they looked at her, they judged her, and then she stopped. And I looked so sad. You could tell I looked sad. I got teary eyed because I was humiliated. And my mother tells people that I suffer from depression because my life was that good. And she gave me such a fantastic childhood. I'm sorry, I have to laugh, that I just was not prepared for adulthood. And her vision of my childhood is so skewed because it wasn't, it was bad and good. It was very tragic and loving. Like I make space for her perspective. I mean, we had laughs and we had fun, and I knew my mother would die for me. But the question is, why did she kill me? Why did she go on those tangents? Why did she try to humiliate me? And it was to please people and kind of use me as this, especially because every party I ever went to with my mother, and her family liked me way more than they liked her. I haven't been to one single party where people didn't love me and my mother just ended up eating cake quietly in the corner. And I don't know if it's envy. I don't know. I don't think it is. I don't want to think that. But it's definitely something that I note and I think is toxic. That kind of, let me take the brightest bulb in the room and dim it in front of everybody so that people notice me more and I have a topic. And I don't want to be anybody's exchange anymore. Not for something as simple as fries. Because I know it sounds crazy, but I talked to her about it and I was like, you know, you chose French fries over my comfort. At the end of the day, you bought another plate. You could have just let me finish that one. And no one ate it. No one ate the other plate. And that's just something, she had to say. And they looked at her like, I think you have OCD. Um, she just had to say she did that. And she hid forks and she bought extra fries. And it just didn't matter that I looked sad or dehydrated. And it sucks. It sucks because if somebody is willing, and it's something that I'm trying to really assess in therapy, if somebody is willing to exchange your peace and your pride over a plate of fries, do they love you? I don't want to think that my mother doesn't love me because I already know my father doesn't. And but I don't know if not accepting that both my parents didn't love me is what's holding me back. Big yikes, babies. Follow and subscribe.